Ever since the early days of the PlayStation 2 era, I've been a massive fan of Final Fantasy X. From the music, the graphics, the immersive story, the unique conditional turn-based battle system, to me, this was an amazing game that holds up now many years later. But some people have been commenting on my videos lately, arguing that the main character who we thought was the main character actually isn't the main character. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing, is Yuna the main character of Final Fantasy X? I've got a few reasons that I put together why she might actually be the main character, so I think this is going to be a pretty interesting video, so make sure to stick around. As always, before we get to that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like weekly JRPG content, weekly gaming content, and comment down below, let me know your thoughts on the video. Is Yuna the main character? Let me know. So if you're watching this video, I'm sure you probably know the plot, the themes, pretty much everything that happens in Final Fantasy X. If for some reason you haven't finished the game, there will be spoilers here, so you've been warned. So anyway, the first point in our video is Yuna's pilgrimage. Now, Yuna's pilgrimage to defeat Sin is the primary driver of the game's plot. The goal is to summon the final Aeon, a powerful creature that can temporarily defeat Sin, the key word being temporarily, and bring about a period of peace called the Calm. However, yes, the victory is temporary as Sin inevitably returns due to this endless cycle of death and rebirth in Spira, caused by the teachings of Yevon, the dominant religion. This cycle is known as the Spiral of Death. Sounds great. Now, during this pilgrimage, Yuna and her guardians visit several temples around the world where she must complete the Cloister of Trials to obtain the power of the Aeons. Now, these are powerful beings like summons in other Final Fantasy games that she must summon to aid her in battle. Now, there's lots of different temples throughout the game like Besaid, Kilika, Jose, and Macalania. At each temple, Yuna gains power of a new Aeon or a new summon, which was always really fun and always looked forward to that. Now, as the pilgrimage progresses, Yuna and her guardians begin to unravel a lot of disturbing truths about the pilgrimage and the teachings of Yevon. Now, one thing that gets discovered by Tidus later on in the game is that once the final Aeon is summoned, Yuna has to sacrifice herself just as her father did to defeat Sin. And moreover, we learn that the final Aeon does not truly destroy Sin, but only temporarily defeats it, perpetuating the cycle of death. And Yuna faces the dilemma of fulfilling her duty as a summoner and sacrificing her life, or finding another way to defeat Sin permanently. And with the help of Tidus and the rest of her guardians, Yuna ultimately rejects the tradition of sacrificing summoners and instead looks for a different way to break the cycle once and for all. And her pilgrimage ends not with death, but with the destruction of Sin for good. The people of Spira are finally free from this cycle of death or the spiral of death, and then the eternal calm begins. However, Tidus, who is revealed to be a dream of the faith, vanishes as a consequence, leaving Yuna with both triumph and loss. So yeah, without Yuna's quest, there is no central narrative to follow. Tidus' presence in the world and his desire to learn more are really secondary to Yuna's mission. The goal of defeating Sin and saving Spira revolves entirely around her, positioning her as pretty much the central figure of the story of Final Fantasy X. Hang on, before we get any further, did you guys know that almost 90% of the people that watch my channel on the regular aren't subscribed? So if you like really fluffy cats, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Anyway, back to the video. Now, the emotional weight of Final Fantasy X largely rests on Yuna's internal conflict. Her struggle with the knowledge that her pilgrimage will lead to her death and her eventual decision to find another way to save Spira drives much of the game's emotional resonance. The start of Final Fantasy X, Yuna is selfless, driven by a deep sense of duty. She's the daughter of High Summoner Braska, who sacrificed himself to defeat Sin 10 years prior, and Yuna is determined to follow in his footsteps. And raised in a world shaped by the teachings of Yevon, she wholeheartedly believes in the Summoner's role, defeating Sin through self-sacrifice for the greater good of Spira. And as Yuna's pilgrimage goes on, the cracks begin to appear in her stoic acceptance of her fate. Encounters with characters like Seymour, who propose alternative paths through manipulation or exploitation like forced marriage, force Yuna to confront harsh realities of her pilgrimage. Initially naive to the full scope of Spira's political and religious systems, she begins to recognize the hypocrisy and flaws in the teachings of Yevon, especially after the revelation of Seymour's plans and the corruption within Yevon itself. And as Yuna grows, her character arc shifts from one of compliance to defiance, and by the time she reaches Zanarkand, she is fully aware that the teachings of Yevon are built on lies and manipulation. And despite this knowledge, Yuna remains committed to saving Spira, but now she resolves to find a way to defeat Sin at this point without sacrificing herself or continuing the cycle of death. Now, her transformation into more assertive and independent leader also reaches its peak when she rejects the final summoning entirely. She no longer sees her value as merely a tool of sacrifice, but as someone who can create real, lasting change. Her decision to break with the tradition of summoners choosing death for the sake of Spira represents the culmination of her development into a character who really challenges everything she's known up until this point. Now, while Tidus's perspective is often the viewpoint of the player, you playing the game, it's Yuna's emotional journey that really connects the player to the deeper themes of sacrifice, love, and your duty, and her relationships with the other characters, particularly Tidus, are central to the story's emotional impact, with the resolution of her character arc providing most of the game's most poignant moments. Now, Tidus serves as the narrator of Final Fantasy X, providing you with an outsider's perspective on the world of Spira, so our journey is Tidus's journey. His narration frames the entire story, beginning with the game's opening scene where they're around the campfire and he's reflecting on the journey that he's undertaken so far. It's interesting because as someone from a seemingly different time period, Tidus acts both as a guide and more or less a stand-in for you, the player, asking questions and challenging the established norms of Spira. It's very interesting. Tidus, as his role as the narrator, he conveys a mix of wonder, confusion, skepticism about Spira's traditions, particularly regarding Yevon's teachings and the Summoner's Pilgrimage. This allows the game to explore complex themes like faith and destiny and sacrifice through the eyes of someone who's completely unfamiliar with them. And his personal emotions and growth are also revealed through his narration. As he becomes more invested in Yuna's journey and learns the truth about his own existence, his tone shifts from carefree to contemplative. His role as a narrator enhances, of course, the emotional impact of the story, making his eventual revelation as a dream of the faith all the more poignant when the game concludes with his farewell. I think that his presence in the story amplifies Yuna's importance, as much of his character development is tied to his growing love for her. This really reinforces the idea that, maybe Yuna is the true protagonist of the game and not Tidus, as the stakes of the story are intimately tied to her decisions and her actions. We're just seeing it through his eyes. Now, the turning point or the climax of Final Fantasy X's story comes when Yuna decides to reject the teachings of Yevon and refuse the final summoning, choosing instead to confront sin in a new way. She declares that she will not sacrifice her life or the lives of her guardians for a temporary victory, refusing to perpetuate the cycle of death that has plagued Spira for generations. Instead, she finds another way to defeat sin permanently, one that doesn't involve death or the futile ritual of Yevon, blah, blah, blah. This whole moment is significant because Yuna has always been devoted to her duty as summoner, and her entire life has been shaped by the teachings of Yevon. Choosing to defy these teachings marks her ultimate growth into a really independent leader, unbound by the traditions that once controlled her fate. I really like this part of her character arc. Now, what does this have to do with the argument of her being the main character? Well, consider it the true turning point, not just for the story, but for the world itself here. Yuna herself is deciding to do the thing, while Tidus and the rest of the gang, the Guardians, support her in doing the thing. And of course, the ending. In the game's epilogue, Yuna delivers a speech to the people of Spira, emphasizing the themes of hope, rebuilding, and independence. She speaks to the future, free from sin and the oppressive teachings of Yevon, encouraging the people to come together and create a better world. Her words signify her transition from a summoner once bound by tradition to a leader who will now help guide Spira into a new era. And this moment really solidifies the idea that Final Fantasy X is, at its core, Yuna's story of growth, self-empowerment, and leadership. Although Tidus disappears at the end as he was once a dream of the faith, the focus remains on Yuna and how she must move forward without him. Because the scene where Yuna says goodbye to Tidus is heart-wrenching. Yes, it makes me bawl every time I think about it, every time I watch it, but it also emphasizes in that moment her strength. She chooses to continue living, knowing that she has the responsibility to now lead Spira into a new future. And the final image of her standing alone, gazing out over the sea, symbolizes her resilience and determination to face the future even without Tidus by her side. And of course, years later, we got Final Fantasy X-2, which is more fan-servicey than anything else, yes, and it follows the events of Yuna later on, who's transformed herself from the self-sacrificing summoner of the first game into a more confident and now independent woman. I mean, the opening dance scene of Final Fantasy X-2, I loved it. I actually, funnily enough, I actually used to dance in my room to that song. Comment down below if you liked this song, because man, this song went harder than it should have. But now, In Final Fantasy X-2, she's part of a sphere hunting group called the Gullwings with Riku from Final Fantasy X and a new character, Pain, and they embark on a quest to find spheres that contain recordings of past events, hoping to uncover more about Tidus, whom, of course, she still longs for. So yes, while Tidus serves as the narrator and the guide for the player, Yuna's pilgrimage, her emotional arc, and her ultimate decision to challenge her fate laid out for her really very well shows that, yeah, she might be the true main character of Final Fantasy X. Her journey shapes the story, drives the plot, provides the emotional depth that defines the game. Whereas Tidus, he's just along for the ride and maybe a game of Blitzball or two. I think it's interesting to explore that side of the argument because, to be honest with you, it's something that I never really considered until today's video. So anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, comment down below, and we'll see you again on the next video. Bye-bye.